For all your t-shirt needs, check out TeePublic's Killer Selection. Follow the link in the description. Hey, what's up, people? Pizzal here, and I'm sure many of you guys already know that finally, after over a year, a judgment has been reached in the case of Sean Cunningham versus Victor Miller over the rights to the original Friday the 13th. Now, I've been out of town. I've been kind of out of the loop lately, off of social media, so I got this news a little late, but I had several people send me articles about the judgment, asking me what my thoughts were on it, etc., etc. And of all the articles that were sent to me, the one that was the most informative came from The Hollywood Reporter, which I'll post a link to in the description. That article also includes the 62-page summary judgment from U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Underhill. And that's pretty informative. So I'll put a link to the Hollywood Reporter article, and that will include a link to the 62-page judgment down in the description. But I've had quite a few people ask me if I think that this judgment will finally be the end of this sort of void, this black hole that Friday the 13th has been in since this whole lawsuit came about. Are we going to immediately have a new Friday the 13th film in the works, etc., etc.? And I think even though this judgment, it's great, it's long overdue, we are not out of the woods just yet. Larry Zerner, of course, Shelley from Part 3, an entertainment attorney himself, tweeted out recently saying Victor Miller wins round 1 of the Friday the 13th lawsuit. Sean will certainly appeal, but this could put pressure on Sean to settle. So there will definitely be an appeal. I definitely think there's going to be an appeal. And even if there's not an appeal and Sean throws his hands up and says, screw it, let's settle this thing, I mean, they could go back and forth over a settlement for God knows how long. So we are definitely not out of the woods with this lawsuit as of yet. But the article from the Hollywood Reporter brings up a lot of really interesting and really landmines that could continue this lawsuit for God knows how long. It's just, things are really complicated now. I'm going to read directly from the Hollywood Reporter article about the judgment, and I quote, "Nearly 40 years ago, a screenplay was written about Camp Crystal Lake," opens a 62-page summary judgment opinion from U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Underhill. The film created from the screenplay went on to significant commercial success. Lurking below that peaceful surface, however, was the Copyright Act's termination right, waiting for just the right moment when it would emerge and wreak havoc on the rights to the screenplay. So Judge Underhill getting a little cinematic here with his opening to his 62-page summary judgment. Maybe that's why it took over a year for him to make this judgment, because he was really, really working on that prose. But yeah, anyway, without going into too much detail about the whole Copyright Act termination thing, I'm sure you guys probably all know this already. There's a provision in the copyright law that allows authors to terminate a grant of rights and reclaim ownership to an intellectual property 35 years after publishing. From my understanding, this is something that particularly in the music industry comes into play quite a bit, but it also happens a lot in the film industry. However, from what I was told, 99% of these cases in the film industry end with a quick settlement. However, this case was that 1% that did not, and just went on and on and on and on. And the whole thing basically has to do with Sean Cunningham tried to say that Victor Miller was basically a hired gun. Him writing the Friday the 13th screenplay was a work for hire, that Sean Cunningham dictated everything to Miller, and Miller basically just sat down and typed it out. He was paid X amount to do that, and when he was paid that amount, he walked away and he was done with Friday the 13th. On the other hand, Miller says, no, it was not a work for hire. I had a lot of creative input on the screenplay. So no, it was not a work for hire. I wasn't an employee. I was an independent contractor. The judgment goes on to say, I hold that Miller did not prepare the screenplay as a work for hire, and that Miller's second termination notice validly terminated Horror's rights to the copyright in the screenplay to Friday the 13th, writes the judge. Horror Inc. being part of the producers, of course, who produced pretty much all of the Friday the 13th films. Specifically, Underhill determines that the screenplay wasn't a work for hire, not prepared within scope of employment, and that labor law doesn't require holding that screenwriter as an employee. Instead, he's an independent contractor. So the judge has said, no, this was not a work for hire, in my opinion. Victor Miller was an independent contractor. He goes on to say, in sum, although Cunningham possessed ultimate approval authority over Miller's output, that fact is consistent with a hiring party's role in both independent contractor and employment relationships. The simple fact that Cunningham provided direction or supervision is also not dispositive. Although the record points to frequent interaction between Cunningham and Miller, there is little in the record to suggest that such interactions frequently consisted of Cunningham exercising close control over Miller's work. And there's nothing in the record that suggests Cunningham controlled the details of Miller's creative expression or otherwise directed the performance of Miller's daily activities. Despite a lack of detailed control over Miller's expression or confining control over Miller's work habits, however, Cunningham's discussions with Miller and approval authority did broadly affect the aesthetic content of the screenplay. Now, we get into some really murky territory here insofar as settlements and or appeals. Like I said, I think Sean Cunningham will probably appeal. That means this thing's going to go on. There will be another summary, etc., etc. Even if he does not appeal, then you're talking about making a settlement, and that could go back and forth for God knows how long. Now, it gets even murkier as the article goes on to state, if no settlement occurs and any appeal is unsuccessful, there could be future legal battles over trademarks as well as the character of Jason. According to the producers, Miller created a Jason character who died as a young boy, while it was sequels that presented Jason as a living adult monster. So, who owns Jason? That's the big question here. Victor Miller created Jason. He created the boy Jason who drowned in Crystal Lake. He did not create the adult Jason that we all think of when we think of Jason Voorhees, but he created Jason. So how much of Jason does Victor Miller own, or does he just own the boy Jason from the first film? Then we get into the murky waters of, well, wait a minute, what if Ron Kurz, who wrote Friday the 13th Part 2, comes along and exercises this provision in the Copyright Act and says, well, wait a minute, I wrote the adult Jason in Part 2 with the sack on his head. I want control of all the characters in Friday the 13th Part 2, I guess with the exception of Alice, and Jason the adult with the sack on his head. Well, then you could have the writers of Friday the 13th Part 3 come along, exercise this right in the copyright law and go, wait a minute, we wrote the adult Jason that everybody thinks of when they think of Jason, with the hockey mask, etc., etc. Then you could get into the whole murky water of, well, who brought the hockey mask? Who suggested the hockey mask? Because that's, I hate to say the word murky again, but that's some murky territory too, as far as who takes the credit for introducing the hockey mask into Part 3. I know there's at least 3 people I can think of off the top of my head who like to take credit for that from the different documentaries that I've seen on the making of Part 3. So we're getting into some really deep, murky water here going forward with the case. Now, I don't know if Ron Kurz or the writers of Part 3, will try to do that, or even if they could do that. But I'm just saying, now we're getting into the nickel and dime type of stuff here that could really be problematic, especially when you're talking about who owns Jason. Because I think you can make a Friday the 13th film without the title Friday the 13th, as long as Jason's in there. But you can't make a Friday the 13th film without Jason. But which Jason are you going to use? Which Jason do you have the rights to use? Boy Jason, adult Jason, but then which adult Jason? There's Tater Sack Jason, there's Jason, there's Roy Jason. And then are we going to make, are we going to specify, living Jason versus zombie Jason? I mean, I don't know. But we're definitely not out of the woods with this thing just yet. This judgment is a great thing. But that's step one down. But it took us over a year to reach step one. How long is it going to take us to reach step two, where, both sides shake hands and agree on, okay, you own this, you own that, we'll split this way and this way, and you've got this percentage of this and I've got that percentage of that. That's a whole other ball game. That's a whole other ball of wax that could take a long time to sort out. Just that end of it could take forever, and then you're getting into the whole Jason aspect of it and who owns which Jason. So there's definitely more road to hoe here as far as this lawsuit is concerned. I think we're seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel, but I think it's going to be a long tunnel until we are at the end. Now, I could be completely wrong, and I hope I am. I mean, the best case scenario is Sean Cunningham just throws his hands up in the air and goes, okay, let's settle with the guy. They offer Victor Miller whatever Victor Miller thinks is fair, whatever the two sides think are fair. And they say, okay, let's make another Friday the 13th film. And they go from there. That's the best case scenario. But even then, that case scenario could take a while. But yeah, it's a good sign. Step one is done. But man, it took us a long time to reach step one. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this whole thing down in the comment section below. Again, read this article on thehollywoodreporter.com, thumb through or scroll through the 62-page summary judgment, from Judge Underhill. Do you think it's, is this the first of many steps going forward that could take potentially years to complete, or is this the first step toward hopefully a very quick settlement, and we get a new Friday the 13th as soon as possible? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Yeah, I mean, my fingers are crossed for option 2, but the legal system, and when you're talking about money and things like that, man, they take a while. But yeah, I'm excited that at least step one is down. We finally got this judgment. It's been over a year. I mean, my goodness, what a year it's been. It's just been sort of one disappointment after another for Friday the 13th fans. And this is at least some good news, but some good news is better than no good news, I guess. So let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments section below. As always, thanks so much for watching, or in this case, listening to this video. If you're not following me on social media, those links are in the description. Take care, and until next time, peace. Join the A Buck a Month Club and help support my channel on Patreon. Thank you to my current patrons: Kevin Smythe, Orc145626, B Movie Mike, Robert Sobel, Turi Delamore, Stephen Flanagan, Lori Holt, Mitch Odell, Farron Sutton, Craig Farrand, Jeremiah Lambert, Grindhouse Grotto, Joseph Charlesworth, PB Sam 6, Derek Jenna, Demon Waffles, Tim Williams, Stone Gassman, Zachary Barton, Mr. Bibby 86, James Welch, Eli Geisler, Jeff Overing, Cliff Hostetter, Kyle McGuire, Jay the Stingray, and Lauren Dixon. Say hello to the internet, Jeremy.
Hello to the internet.